Let's take a look at a couple clips here. The first one is how our movement is currently. It just kind of goes exactly how we would expect. The second one, however, has a couple things added to it. We'll notice the camera's bobbing, and when we move left and move right, the camera's going to sway. Let's take a look at how easy we can implement that to our current character controller. We're going to start off by adding the swaying left and right when we move our character left and right by strafing. And before we write any code, let's think about what we're actually going to do here. What we'll notice with our character, if you've been following the last couple videos, is we have our camera coming out of the head, but it's attached to the neck. And maybe when we move left, we want the camera to rotate left. And when we move right, we want the camera to rotate right in conjunction. So if I take a look at my neck, I'll probably want to rotate about the Z axis. And that's going to help me go from, say, 0 to 5. So that'll angle my camera where I need it to be. To actually write the code for doing the swaying side to side, we need to think about how we're going to trigger this. And the way that I'm going to do it is by relating to the x-axis of our player. So when we have our player input direction, which we're already getting, we're getting a vector of our move left, right, forward, and backward. When that's greater than 0, maybe we're going to be moving to the right. When it's less than 0, we're moving to the left. And when it is 0, it means we're standing still. So we can use these as our triggers for what we're trying to do. So down at the bottom of our player movement script, we can add a couple extra lines of code here that can help us do what we're trying to do. So we'll say that if our input direction dot x is greater than 0, we're going to do something. Else if the input direction is less than 0, we're also going to do something. And then otherwise, we're just going to do nothing. So that way it's going to help us if the x is positive, negative, or basically 0. We can set our function to do something. Now for the greater than, we can use that neck rotation like we talked about. So neck dot rotation, and again, we're going to use the z-axis of it. And with that, we're going to do a lerp angle. Now, lerp angle is effectively going to do a linear interpolation between a certain value, another value, along a weight value. So I can set that between my current neck.rotation.z, and then we're going to set it for our to location to a degree to radian, and I'll set it to some small value, and maybe we'll start off with something like 5. Now, because we're going to be going in the positive x direction, instead of a normal 5, we'll do a negative 5. And then lastly, we can set the weight value. Now, this is going to take some playing around with to get to something you like, but I like a 0.05 for that value. And what this is going to do once we actually go and test this out is going to start to move the camera. Now, before I do that, I just want to set the other directions as well. So I'll just copy and paste this code into my other conditional statements, and I can swap some values around. So in my input direction dot x is less than 0, we'll go for that linear interpolation from our neck rotation to a value of positive 5. And then on the other one, we're going to go with just back to 0. So what that's going to do is going to help me get that movement down. Now when I go to play test this, we'll see that when I move right, the camera's going to bob or sway to the right. When I move left, it's going to bob or sway to the left. And when I release, it'll interpolate back to 0. To get our camera to bob up and down as we're walking is actually going to take less code than it took to get it to sway left and right. And because of that, we're going to use an animation. And we're going to go add a node as a child to our neck, and we're going to just do an animation player. Now inside of our animation player, we're going to create a new animation. We'll call this Bob. And inside of Bob, what we're going to want to do is we're going to modulate the positive Y translation of our neck. So I can select my neck, make sure that my inspector is set to 0. And then in the transform tab, we'll just grab a keyframe for our transform of the neck. I can create that. I'll drag out to 3 seconds. We'll then type in our value of say 0.6 just to move it up a little bit. And we'll grab that keyframe as well. And then lastly, I'll go another 3 out. We'll type in our value back to the original of 0.475, and we'll key this. Now, if we notice something, that sometimes it doesn't always take that last frame. So we can just overwrite this and say 0.475 again to readjust that, and it'll adjust the keyframe accordingly. Now, last thing I want to do is adjust the length of my animation to 0.6. And then when I loop this and play it, we're just going to see the camera's going to go up and down as we go. Switching back to our script now, all we have to do is add a couple lines of code to our player movement function to get this thing to work. And just below the rest of our lines that we just added, I'll do the same thing, and I'll say that if my input direction dot y is greater than 0, so we are moving forward or backwards, I will do something. And then else if the input direction dot y is less than 0, we'll do something else. And then finally, we're going to say else will cancel out those things. So inside of my input direction dot y is greater than 0, we'll just grab that animation player out of our tree and we'll play Bob. So we'll play that animation. Similarly, we'll take that and put it in the other direction as well. So it'll play it going forwards and backwards. And then lastly, in the else, so when we come to a stop, rather than play, we can just stop all the animations. So when I hit play now and take a look at my scene, going forward, the camera's going to bob. Going backwards, the camera's going to bob. And when I stop, we're good. Now, when I combine these, it still looks pretty smooth, and I can play around with my values to make everything work out just the way I expect.